Shalom, everybody. I'm Joel Blackford. I represent Blackford Talks Prophecy. We just love introducing great guests. Ronn Johnson, Dr. Ronn Johnson, is a friend of mine. He's been on the show a few times in the past. I don't think he's ever been on Blackford Talks Prophecy, but you've been on a prophecy show with me a couple of
I
times.
think so. I'm
Yep.
forgetting when it was. Yeah.
And you are part of the Heiser Institute and Foundation.
Mhm.
And so people generally know something about Heiser, but I'd like them to know something about Ronn Johnson. So if you could explain your background and things about you.
Mike and I met in college in 1981, and we struck
Okay.
up a friendship immediately. I was a sophomore; he was a freshman. We talked for our first meeting was a 5-hour meeting in the stairwell, and we just talked all through the night. We were fascinated by each other's love for the Bible. He just had a fun way about him, and it was an instant friendship. So we went through college together, often talked in the van on baseball trips about the Bible, and I mean that was our world, and but really good friendship developed. We went off to seminary together pretty much. We married around the same time.
Which seminary, just for the fun of it? Which
Calvary
one?
Baptist Theological Seminary in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, a small Baptist seminary.
Okay, all right.
Where Mike was from. Mike was just from down that, down the road from Lansdale. That's where he was from. So
I thought he was a cheesehead.
No, he ended up in Madison later.
Okay,
He went to school there, but no, he's a Pennsylvanian.
Okay.
So we went to seminary together, and then we both went down to Dallas Seminary together. And all this time, again, we were, Mutt and Jeff, when it came to every Friday night, we had what we called the Inklings. We kind of stole it from the C.S. Lewis idea. Okay. And Mike and I and 3 other friends would talk deep into the night. Our wives would be either in the other room or at home, and we would talk theology deep into the night. That was just our way of in seminary to just let it all out, because when you're in that kind of a setting, you can get a little stuffed up, shall we say. So
sure.
Just enjoyed our friendship and our theology at that point. And then we went down to Dallas Seminary together, all 4 of us, wives, the wives and him and I. Then he financially couldn't afford to stay, and so it was providential. This is all God. He got a full ride scholarship up to the University of Pennsylvania to get a history degree. So he went up to UPenn and did a history degree, and then went. And from there, we were kind of. Then I went and taught at a small Bible college in Owatonna, Minnesota. I invited him to join me.
Was it Pillsbury?
Yep.
Was it Pils? Oh,
yep. And when I became the chairman of the Bible department, my first line of work, or my first decision that I had to make, was to hire Mike. And so Mike came, and we were on the Bible department together there for a couple of years. At that point, I got another job offer, and I left. And he went off to Madison and got his PhD there. So then he went off to Lagos, and all. So from about 2000 or 1994 and on, we didn't live together, but we, telephone calls turning into emails and the whole thing. So when Mike died in 2020, was it 2023? Okay. I sat with Trina in her living room with my wife, and she asked if I'd be willing to pick up the pieces with his ministry and whatever I could do. I mean, it was just a kind of a poor Drina, she's left with, holding the bag of a legacy that is just absolutely phenomenal. By the way, let me say, and stop me if I'm getting afield here, but
no, you're doing great.
I want people to know that the best thing about Mike was his Christianity, his practical Christianity. He was, as I like to say, and I'm stealing from C.S. Lewis, the most converted man I ever knew. Godly man. And so criticize Mike all you want. I mean, that was how we always got along, because we could laugh at each other, especially him at me, about my theology, and I'd do the same. I mean, we'd go at it pretty good, but we always did it in deep friendship, mostly laughing at each other, not ever getting angry. But his ability to think on his feet, to his memory was just audacious, and so. Where am I going with this? Criticize Mike if you want to with his theology. And of course, he put himself out there. That's the thing. When you write and you produce like he did, you're just asking for people.
He had people abusing him.
Absolutely. But don't ever pick on his motivation, his love for the Lord, his love for his wife. I mean, he was a godly man. So anyway, when we left the living room that day, it became kind of a conversation between Drina and I about where I'd fit in. And it wasn't to take anything from Mike. It was just trying to keep his ministry going, because he had stuff in his files that he wanted to publish.
Yeah.
And Drina sent me that, and that's where my theology book is coming from. A lot of it, I mean, a lot. He gave me about 70 pages of a theology book starting, and we had talked about that, writing a theology book after The Unseen Realm. And so that's been a year and a half project that's still sitting on my computer waiting to come out. So anything more there? Is that good enough?
I want to cover a couple of little things like the Logos Bible study software. He contributed quite a bit to that.
He was, I was sitting on my couch in my living room. I remember where I was when I got the call from the president of Logos back in the early 2000s. And he said, I just got a resume on my desk from a guy named Michael Heiser. Do you know anything about him? I was on his resume. And I said, and I don't know how it came across, but it must have helped, because he got hired the next day, I heard. But I just, what's the word I want? My verb here. What is it? I basically told him, you've got to hire this guy, because he has a Bob Jones degree. He knows the conservative side. He has a University of Minnesota or Wisconsin degree. He knows the liberal side. He knows his Bible better than any person I know. He would be the perfect person. So that's how he became the academic editor at Logos, early 2000s. And he was there till 2017-ish, I think it was. And then he, I forget the year, he moved to Florida. But that's how he got on the Logos thing. And it was a perfect setting for him, because he had access to every electronic reference tool in the world. And it was like giving, slop to a pig. That is a terrible analogy, but I mean, he wallowed in that, and it was just wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
And he used it during his Bible studies. I mean, he was
totally
constantly on the app showing, well, this is what it means, and playing around. He just geeked out on it.
No, he has a special place in God's kingdom. I mean, there's no other way to put it. We all do, but his is easy to identify, because God. I was with him when he sat and taught a lesson at a college where he was being interviewed, and he didn't get that job. And I asked the chairman where I was teaching, why didn't you hire him? And he just didn't like his style. I forget what it was. And I was thinking, you don't know what you're going to lose by not hiring him. But he didn't. And then a couple months later, he got Logos. So that, again, is just providential what God did with him. And what I will wonder about, and I'm going to ask the Lord when I get there, is why you took Mike when you did, because he was just on the brink of so much more. But again, God does what he does, and we have to understand that and go forward. But that's my role now, is I'm just trying to pick up the pieces and help Drina keep Mike's legacy alive in whatever way I can.
So what does that mean? How do you keep the legacy alive?
We do a podcast, me and Mike Chu, good friend of mine now. And Mike is a brilliant guy. He's seminarian at Gordon Conwell. And he knows the DCW, Divine Counsel Worldview idea backwards and forwards. He knows Mike's work. Mike knew him well before he died. So we do a podcast every week. I'm writing things, like this theology book is going to be huge once it gets out. I mean, it's so much stuff. How do you put this all into one book? But turning the podcast into commentary. So we have a Genesis commentary coming out. We're doing John right now on our podcast. That'll turn into a commentary as well. So there's just various little parts of this. We're doing a conference this fall. We did one last year, and maybe that'll get going more and more. So there's just, of course, I work an 8-hour day job at a bank. So
I didn't know that. Oh
yeah.
Ron,
I have my normal life of paying the bills, and then I have this on the side. So when I come home, it is.
Well, let's plug the bank. Which bank do you work at?
Wells Fargo.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to plug them. This has nothing to do with our theology tonight, but
you can plug them. Wells Fargo, everybody knows them. So you're a banker.
Well, no, I mean, I was a theologian, but when and it's a long story, but my Divine Counsel Worldview stuff, as I taught it, my denomination caught wind of it, and I'm sure some of your listeners would understand this. When the denomination head came to me and said, it sounds like you're saying things that our denomination does not approve of. We sat down, had a long 5-hour conversation. We parted company. We shook hands. It was gentle, kind, even laughter a little bit. But I lost that job, and I was a pastor and a teacher in a school, and I just knew, and he knew, and we all knew that I didn't fit. And so my thought was, well, the Lord will lead me into another ministry. This was 2012, and so about 14 years ago. So that just again, and stop me if I'm getting too.
No,
deep in
this
the
is.
weeds, but
I did not know that you were. It's not persecution, but it
No.
wasn't pleasant.
It wasn't pleasant, because what happened was, and again, I think your listeners will feel this.
Yeah.
You have this in your head, this divine counsel stuff that Mike had talked about. I mean, it affects so much of your thinking in so many
Right.
parts of the Bible, right? So I went to several denominations, especially because we're both in the Twin Cities. There's some,
Right.
some major denominations that are headquartered here. And I went to 3 of them, and I sat down with the pastoral search committee chairman, or whatever you want to call it, each time. And I told him I'd like to look for a pastorate. That was what I just felt,
Yeah.
called to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Because I love this kind of work, and I love the
Oh, yeah.
pastorate. I had pastored for 15 years before I had quit.
Okay.
And each of those 3 said, well, and they looked at my theology. They always make you write a paper,
Okay,
a 5
sure.
to 10 page statement of faith, whatever. And they saw some parts of that made them go, huh? It wasn't, blatant, but it was just enough that each time they said, what's this? And I said, well, I believe this. And I thought, between me and the Lord, I said, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to try to
Right,
hide
yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And each of the 3, again, very kindly, but very clearly said, no, you wouldn't be welcome, to even put your name in our denomination. So at that point, there was some tears there. I remember sitting in my car crying one time, just like, why is it that this worldview that I think is very biblical, and your listeners would say that, would not lead me to ministry, but frankly away from it. So at that point, I just threw my resume to the wind. I got picked up by Wells Fargo as a technical writer, and it's been a delight to work with them. I just yesterday got a ping from one of my fellow workers. We all work online,
Yeah. Okay.
haven't met any of them. They all live in different cities.
Okay.
And she said, can I talk to you privately? And I said, sure. And she called me, and here's how the conversation went. I know you're a man of faith. Can you pray for my husband? And it was a long conversation about that. And I just, that's where my ministry is now, is basically kind of behind the scenes at a bank where people know I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
And so those kind of things happen. And you know what, Joel, it's just as much a ministry as full-time pastoring.
Sure.
It really becomes delightful in that way. So that's what I do for my rent. And then I do this on the side for ministry. So
I did not know that. I thought you were a full-time minister with the Heiser Foundation, and
no, they have no full-time employees. No,
they don't. I kind of thought they did. So interesting. Okay, so this is a gift of love to God for you to even do the show with me, but also to keep Heiser's.
You're not sending me a
online.
paycheck?
No.
Oh.
but you know what? I hope people will watch your shows coming up with Mike, and will participate and buy the Supernatural Worldview book and things like that,
Sure.
And keep the Heiser Foundation going.
For Drina's sake, that's how I think of it. She wants to see Mike's legacy live, and I'm very glad for that. So,
well, it's also fun for you. You love theology.
I do. Oh yeah,
Okay,
This is what I live for.
Okay, and then one other comment. I have to make this because I'm from Minnesota. I wrestled at Hamlin University, and one of my earliest matches as a freshman, I made 177 pounds, but the senior on the team, he finally did make weight, so I had to bounce up to heavyweight. So my first match then of that day was against Pillsbury Baptist, and the guy was about 300 pounds. And
do you know who it was?
No, it would have been. I graduated, or that would have been 1977, probably.
Okay, I could find out in a yearbook who it was.
Huge man, powerful man. He threw me around like a rag doll for about 6 minutes, and I think he finally pinned me, but it hurt. And I was not a state champion wrestler, but I was pretty good. I went to state a few times, but as a little guy. So anyway, the story goes, he walked up to me after the match, after throwing me around like a rag doll, and he said, do you know Jesus? Do you want to talk about? And it's like, buddy, you just threw me around.
We used to give out tracts to our competitors. So
You did. You did. And in this case, it wasn't well received because I had scars and, you know.
oh wow.
So anyway, but yeah, that's Pillsbury Baptist. So are you still a Baptist?
I go to a non-denominational church. I mean, I
Okay.
consider myself a evangelical Christian. So,
Sure.
you know, however, I don't care, I guess it would be the easy. I mean, I say that lovingly, but I identify with Christians of all sorts, and I don't go to a Baptist church.
Okay.
But
did you check out Converge at all?
oh yeah, that's one of the groups I
Oh,
sat
that's one of
with.
the groups. Okay, interesting. Because I happen to be talking. We're trying to rent for a Bible study in St. Paul, and one of the people in the building is a Converge startup, and so it's just intriguing. I kind of thought they were. Well, there's the Piper side, there's the Greg Boyd side, and there's a lot going on there. So, okay. Well, sorry, people, I don't want to take you into Minnesota lore too far, but so you have the slides up. Let me switch the screens. I'd like you to explain what you do and what the supernatural worldview is and what you're trying to teach.
Good. Well, let me what was part of our thinking to do this tonight was where previously I had said in one of your talks that I disagreed with Mike about his 3 rebellions idea.
Yes.
And take that word disagree gently, because again, our conversations always, you know, went down the path of where we agreed and disagreed. It was fun. It was jousting. It was humor. It was just, you know, a lot of fun. So never take the word disagree in a negative light. It was just, we would compare notes on so many things. And this is one of them. So let me, and I think this will be interesting for your folks. Because I think what people want to hear is not just how Mike thought, but how a divine counsel worldview, which is a little, you know, it's broader than just Mike. There's more to it than just what he said, because Mike was very specific about some things where you don't have to be specific. That's the point. So when I go through this, and I'll go through it fast, if people can watch on the screen, it'll be helpful. It's what I call the 3 divine being scenes. Okay. And of course, the 3 are Genesis 3, Genesis 6, and Genesis 10 and 11.
Yes.
Stop me, Joel, whenever you want.
No, this is excellent.
Good.
Please.
So the first, of course, is Genesis 3, which would be the Adam and Eve story and the serpent. And what happens there very fast, of course, what we all know is that the serpent is used by, or a satanic being, we're not sure who it is, but some kind of an evil Elohim, talks to Eve and so forth and so on. And what happens is, now this is where I differed from Mike a little bit, and I certainly differ from evangelicalism in general, and that is that there was no fall in my mind. In other words, what happens is, according to the text, they of course start to die because they don't have access to the tree of life. In other words, I think they were born, and Augustine believed this. So this to me is not orthodoxy, you know, in peril, but that they were born to die and the tree of life kept them alive. So by leaving the garden and not having access to the tree, now therefore guaranteed they would die. The other thing that happens in 3:22 is it says they have become like one of us, to know good and evil. And I take that to, good and evil to be a merism, or a, you know, the bookends, like young and old alike. So it's everything in between. So knowledge of good and evil means some kind of divine knowledge that the divine world had Yahweh and created Elohim. And so they leave the garden with something that happened in a good way to them, as it were. It wasn't what God intended, apparently, but they now had the ability, and watch this, of course, happen in the rest of the Bible, to commune with Elohim on a pretty regular basis because of this new knowledge. So that's scene number 1, right?
Perfect.
Scene number 2 would be Genesis 6, where they're called in Hebrew, B'nai Elohim, sons of gods. And that just means in Hebrew, divine class beings. So as you compare that to the women that were, you know, on the earth, or on my picture there, somehow, and this probably was some kind of male possession or something, who knows, these divine beings, which is an odd issue. You know, this is an odd story, obviously, but that's why it's here, procreated with these women. And they had, as a result, these large giant beings called Nephilim, which again in Hebrew, that's just the word. So we're not sure exactly what the word means, you know, something like fallen ones or something like that.
Yes.
And so that's the story of Genesis 6. Of course, they're wiped out by the flood, that whole generation. And that's the second scene that Mike and I, or that, you know, that Mike talks about being a rebellion. Okay.
Yes.
The third one is the Genesis 10 and 11. Actually, Genesis 10 is more the narrative, and 11 is kind of looking back and explaining what happened in 10. And it's the Tower of Babel story, and especially the division that happens after it. The key of that story, which is often missed again by just the average evangelical preacher, I think, is that this ziggurat that was built on the plain of Shinar was not just to make their name great, but it was to make their name great through the worship of a god. In other words, these are made for, on the top of them, you would have an altar and you would worship. Remember how it says the top was into the heavens or something like that? Well, that means it was used to worship the divine world. And so that's what God was upset about, that they were worshiping, and apparently very successfully worshiping, another deity or deities at that point. So what happens, and this is the parallel passage really, and it's poetry, so we have to be careful, but I think we can do this. In Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, we have a song retelling the story of Genesis 11, and has that famous passage 8 and 9, Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, of, you know, when God separated the worlds, or separated the sons of men at the end of Genesis 10, he did it according to the number of the B'nai Elohim. So that is this, what we call the allotment of the nations to these gods. Now here's the issue, okay? Mike calls these the three rebellions, and I see why. The first one,
I'd like you
Genesis
to repeat
3,
that. You cut out for just a moment there.
Yep.
So he calls it the three rebellions, and you
because
call it
what he does, what he sees in these three stories is a rebellious spiritual world, not just the story, you know, as it happens, but there's some kind of rebellion in the heavens that causes all three stories to happen. So the first one, of course, would be, and it makes sense that there must have been some kind of a evil spirit that did this, you know, to Adam and Eve. The second one would be some kind of evil spirits, plural, that came down to earth and did their thing. The third one would be, the third one would be where God gave these spirits to the nations, and it was, and Psalm 82 then becomes the big text for Mike, because he sees in Psalm 82 God's judgment of these Elohim for what they have done to the nations over time. Okay.
Right.
Now, here's where I disagree, and ever so slightly, but it's fun to think it through. And again, I'm happy to give you my opinion. And get shot at. So, my personal opinion, while Genesis 3 points to the origin of mankind's divine knowledge, number one, and mortality, number two. So they start to die, and they have this amazing knowledge now. The fact that this narrative was never referenced again in the Old Testament speaks to its relative unimportance as a theme. So my take on Genesis 3 is, once you close the book on Adam and Eve and you turn the page to Genesis 4, you pretty much forget about that story, and they're never brought up again in the Old Testament. And even Jesus and Paul in the New Testament does it quite sparingly. So to me, the story of Genesis 3, as important as we make it in most of our evangelical, if not Western theology, you know, the fall and all this, I don't have a fall in my theology because I don't need it. And it's not like I don't want it. I'm just saying that the text never says they did. And so can I read Genesis 3 and move out from Genesis 3 and still have a story to tell without a fall? In my estimation, I do. So I'm not so sure I'd call that a rebellion. I would call it a spirit who comes to Adam and Eve and deceives them, yes, but whether I'd call it a full rebellion, I just don't bother. Okay.
That differs from Heiser.
Yep. Now the second one, again, here's the Genesis 6 one. My personal opinion, similarly, while Genesis 6 speaks to the origin of Israel's enemies upon entering Canaan, remember how this works, that when, besides the flood of Genesis 6, when you, is it Numbers 13, when the 12 spies go into Canaan and come back, they tell Moses, we have seen the Anakim there, the Rephaim, and the Nephilim. So these are apparently these famous kind of guys who apparently shows up again, and how they do it, we're never told, but they're there. And that's why the genocide that Joshua orders takes place. So, but let me finish this here. while this speaks to the origin of Israel's enemies upon entering Canaan, the story is largely ignored in the rest of the Old Testament. The Genesis 6 story seems to be largely ignored. Thus, so
Okay.
I say to myself, the incident is important, in other words, but not vital to what the largest story is telling. Can you get the rest of the biblical story without Genesis 6 there? Again, I'm not trying to push it away because I don't like it. I'm saying, is it ever referenced carefully in the rest of the story? And I would say not really. And I understand where you get into the Sheol thing and the Watchers and the demons of Mike, and there's a lot of stuff to get into from this direction, especially in Mike's view of demons. But that's where Mike and I disagree. So, however, the last one, the Deuteronomy 32 one. Yahweh's decision to apportion the administration of nations to created Elohim will be significant to almost every biblical narrative which comes after it. Abraham's faith in chapter 12 comes right on the heels of the apportionment in chapter 11. That's not incidental to me. That's where, again, Joshua 24:2, Abraham and his father had worshipped other Elohim in Shinar, apparently, and they are called out of Shinar to Canaan to worship Yahweh alone. So that story of apportionment is directly by a story of a conversion of a man's deity that probably was extremely unknown, right? Okay. And yet they are people of faith. And just two quick stories that, to me, again, you could multiply this, Joel, and you know this, by dozens of texts. Two of my favorites are Jephthah. In Judges 11, he's arguing with the king of Ammon or Amor. Is it Ammon? Yeah. Amor. And he says, so then Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people Israel. And are you to take possession of them? Well, and here, listen to his argument. Will not you possess what Chemosh, your Elohim, gives you to possess? And all that Yahweh, our Elohim, has dispossessed before us, we will possess. The argument, and he seems to settle the argument right there with this king. They both go their merry way because they realize the land that they have has been given to them by their Elohim, by their deity. And that's just how they thought. And I'd say that story of Judges 11 is directly accountable to Deuteronomy 32 and Genesis 11. The other one, of course, and here's where I diverge again from Mike. Was this a rebellion? Well, like a king who has senators that administrate his empire into distant lands, that's how I see God using Elohim to rule the world. So when Paul comes into Athens, he says this: he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. I think that has clear denotation or connection to the Deuteronomy 32 thing. So that, here's what Paul's opinion of this moment in history was: so that they should seek in the hope that they may, I get all the words right here, so that they should seek God or the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him. So here's my point, Joel.
You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Okay, well, was Deuteronomy 32 a rebellion? I would say it wasn't intended to be. It was intended to have loyal Elohim, created beings, placed in administrative role around the world, like a senator, down in Judea for an emperor in Rome, something like that. Now, do some go evil? Absolutely. Some go rogue. Apparently, and this is a whole nother subject, it's fun, but the gods of Canaan, I think, are specifically evil compared to the gods of Egypt and the gods of maybe, who knows, other lands around the world at this time. Because by the time the story of Canaan is done, or the story of Israel takes place in First and Second Kings and so forth, you get the sense that Asherah and Baal and some of these gods that they come across are extremely evil. I mean, they're killing children, right? Molech, putting infants into this cauldron of burning coals and stuff like that. So God warns the people when they go into Canaan, look out, don't do this. Now, you can go through the lands of the Amorites, Moabites, don't kill them. But when you get into Canaan, it's going to be a different story. So I think you could read this allotment thus, not as a rebellion, but as a a desire on the part of Yahweh to administrate the world through what he hoped to be, if I can use that word for God, loyal Elohim. Now, of course, Psalm 82 comes along and says, look out, something went wrong. So, all right. So now think of that 32 and how this is going to play out. And stop me again if you want to discuss anything here. But
no, I need to mull it over because you're throwing some new ideas at me.
Okay. So, and this was my dissertation. Again, that story there, let me take 2 minutes and tell it because it's so providential. Mike, and this is like 2000 or 2001. Okay. Mike is doing his dissertation in Madison. That's when he has the guy sit down with him in Sunday school and shows him Psalm 82. And he tells about this in his book. And he has this light bulb moment of other Elohim being real. And the whole thing just, boom in his head. Well, about 2 months later, he comes up to the Twin Cities. He was in Madison. I'm up in St. Paul. We go out to a Keys Cafe. You know what Keys Cafe is?
I know Keys well.
Oh, yeah. So there are, like 5 or 6 of them around. And we go, and I could show you where we were sitting. And he draws on a napkin his dissertation topic about other Elohim being real in the Second Temple Jewish literature. Well, I remember saying this question, Mike, are you saying that if I asked Moses, are the gods of the Old Testament real, that he'd say that they are? And Mike said in his classic way, he said, no, he would be surprised at the question. And it just I remember that, getting the bomb going off in my head thinking, okay, if the gods are real, then, right? And you get all this stuff going on in your head. Right. So that goes off into my dissertation because then I go immediately back home. I had a dissertation topic that was approved at Dallas Seminary, and that's hard enough as it is. And my wife, when she found me changing,
you brought this stuff up to Dallas.
I did, but here's the key: don't tell them. Okay, don't tell Dallas Seminary. My dissertation was on the gods of the Old Testament being the principalities and powers of Paul. Okay, but you can say it in such a way.
Which Paul are you on? Are you on Paul? First Corinthians 15:24, those type of archos and things like that, or are you in Ephesians 6:12? Both. Okay, so you're citing both. Okay.
Yeah, he has 6 references to principalities and powers with Corinthians and Ephesians and Colossians. What are they?
Okay, I didn't see it in Colossians. Okay. So he's referencing these, and we don't, and by the way, you're a theologian. I've asked many theologians to name what it is that Paul's describing. They don't know what an archos is or a cosmocratorus is or any of those guys.
Well, that's what my dissertation was. And it was taking, again, not new stuff. It was just grabbing all this disparate. Here's the problem, Joel. Old Testament people don't talk to New Testament people generally. When you go to seminary,
I didn't know that. Okay.
Old Testament's down that hallway, New Testament's down that hallway, and they just don't talk. Or maybe over coffee, but not over their theology. And so what I did was I just grabbed all the Old Testament stuff, Mark Smith, Charles Worth. I mean, just the standard Old Testament theologians, most of them not, evangelicals. And I overlaid that into the New Testament, where Paul has these guys. They're not angels, remember? The principalities and powers. Paul never calls them angels.
They're not angels, and they're not demons either. Because he doesn't mention.
He calls them rulers and authorities in spiritual places. Well, where does he get that from? My argument was they're simply the Old Testament gods. Now that passed at Dallas, and here's the funny part of it.
That's a shock.
And God bless my committee. They were good men. But when you're doing a dissertation or grading a dissertation, you're looking at the bark on the tree. You're not looking at the forest, right? You're looking at every sentence and every footnote. You're seeing if I'm defending every sentence. But I remember a year or two later, I was at a conference, and my main reader came up to me and we were talking, congratulations for finishing. And I remember I asked him something, I don't know what it was. And I walked away thinking he has no idea what I said in that dissertation, because, this is, to me, pardon me if I'm too excited, but this changes everything. If you make the gods of the Old Testament real, and now you have the story of salvation, here's where it comes, of course, to bear. Salvation is not about atonement. It's about worship. It's about faith. It's about loyalty. It's about conversion from one deity to another. And atonement is part of the story, but it's not the main way, right? So that's why here comes the church, search committee. Let's go back to that story we started with.
Yeah.
And I have in my theology that I'm handing to the pastoral search team that I believe salvation is by loyalty to Yahweh over any other deity. Well, how's that sound?
Works for me.
It's just like, I know, but that people will say, what's that mean? And how, it doesn't sound right to them. So my point is that this whole thing that I now, that I bring to bear, and let me do it on the slides here. If you start with Deuteronomy 32 then, and have these beings real, when you get to Daniel 7, you have this fantastic, and to me, this one whole chapter of my dissertation. I watched, Daniel says, he has this vision, till thrones were put in place, 1,000 thousands ministered to him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, the court was seated, the books were open. This court idea, or a divine council, whatever you want to call it,
it's there.
These beings that are surrounding Yahweh, the greater the king, the greater the court. That's how the ancient world thought. And so the thousands by 10,000s just means we have no idea how massive Yahweh is. And of course, he's the creator of all as it is. But then, of course, what happens is, behold, one like a Bar Anash, a son of man, a human being coming with the clouds of heaven, came to the Ancient of Days, and they, that's those Elohim, brought him near before him, Yahweh. So I get the feeling, and I think the reader is getting this nervousness built in, like, okay, Elohim bring this human being into God's throne room. He has no business being there. He's a human. And they are wondering what's going to happen to him. And of course, the next thing that happens, then to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, and all nations and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting, which shall not pass away. So the end of Daniel 7, that vision is that this human being someday will be given everything that those gods have, and that's where you can make verbal connections between dominion, glory, kingdom. Those words in Aramaic or in Hebrew then fit nicely into the LXX Greek translations that then Paul would use later. So that's where the connection, you can really make a definite connection between Paul's principalities and powers and Daniel 7:14.
Sure.
Okay. Now you get to, again, just follow your Bible through Psalm 110. Yahweh said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. I think those enemies again are those spirits that God had put over the nations that now Jesus will become the ruler over. Now, again, so much passes, we could do it, but for time.
Here you go. Ephesians 6. Yep.
So Ephesians 6, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, Paul tells these Gentiles, but against principalities, powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age. So again, he calls them rulers for a reason. They're not angelic, messengers. These guys actually have power against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. So that's where your battle is. And who knows how it works even today. But Paul, if he were here, Joel, I think you'd agree, he would still say our battle is not Democrat, Republican. It's not Iran. It's not, there's things that are going on maybe on a spiritual level on these kind of storylines, but Paul would still say what's happening is a spiritual battle that you can't even see. Then
he would say that in from Daniel 10, say, where you've got the Prince of Greece and you've got the Prince of Persia, and we're fighting against Iran right now. I assume that prince is still sitting there in the Persian area and still stirring up the pot. I
think the Prince of Persia is, and his name specifically, or his title, because he's that powerful. These Elohim are as different as you and I. In other words, I think they have personality. I think they have strengths and weaknesses. They have tendencies that are, they're persons. They're real. And so the Prince of Persia, I guess where this battle is going on to this very day, it's still Persia, right? And I think that I don't want to get too, charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff, because I think who am I to know what's really happening above the horizon? But I think if Paul were here, he would have no trouble watching the 5:30 news and saying, you guys are going through the same battle we did, really.
Yeah.
Now, here's where it turns salvific. When the Philippian jailer walks out and says, sirs, what must I do to be saved? I think he's simply saying, believe in Psalm 110, believe in Daniel 7, pistuo, the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved. Put in your mind and in reality the fact that Jesus is now Lord over every other spirit, because that guy, again, lived at Philippi, which was full of gods. And so I think that night when he went home, here's what he did. He went to his wife and servants and children. He took the idols off the mantle, burned them or threw them away, and said, we as a household are going to worship Jesus Christ now. and that becomes his conversion story. But notice it's all about worship. It's not about ritual and things like that. So, well, that's pretty much it. I mean, when you get to Revelation 5, and I'll just finish with this, you have the same kinds of stories, but this is the end of the story, right? You are worthy, you were slain, you have redeemed us to God by your blood. I mean, they relive the story of Revelation 5, all the nations, every tongue, every tribe. Now that division of Genesis 11 is now reversed, and you have every tribe, every tongue from Acts 2 and going forward, that now are taking the place of the Elohim in that last line, we shall reign on the earth. So I think that kind of language is pulling from the
you're going
32.
Revelation 5 for that. Okay. Yeah, because I'm kind of confused as to who those people are too. They're Presbyterians though, Ron. You know that. In the Greek.
Oh, okay. I hadn't thought of that.
That's the Greek. Yeah, I'm just having fun with you. Sorry.
I got it. Okay, makes sense. I hope some Baptists are there. I would like to be there.
but the 24 are Presbyterios. So
okay, yeah. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power, riches, wisdom. Right. Just a beautiful ending scene. And I'm not very good on Revelation with timing. I think there's some recapitulation going back and forth, but the basic point, of course, is that Jesus rules forever and ever. You get to Revelation 11:15, and you have the seventh angel of the trumpets, the three bowls, three trumpets, three seals, seven seals,
seven trumpets, seven bowls.
And so without getting into the details, one of them, the seventh trumpet, has this line, the kingdoms, there's that plurality again, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord. It's under one God now.
Are you in Revelation 14 there? Or
you could probably, this is Revelation 11:15.
The kingdoms. You're back in 11, but that's the seventh trumpet. You're right. Never mind.
Yeah, you could probably do it in numerous passages in Revelation.
Yeah.
And as you get to the end, Mike's big thing in his Divine Council stuff. He often talks about the rekindling of the sacred space of Eden on the newly created earth. I'm fine with that if a person wants to go down that path. I tend to see more of a symbolism of a city. That is Jerusalem coming down from heaven, as it were, to the earth. And it's more than just a garden, but now it's even a city. And you have these beautiful lines of Revelation 22. There shall be no more curse. The throne of God and the Lamb shall be in it. His servants shall serve him. They shall see his face. So beautiful end. And you had mentioned, as we talked before we did we turned on the microphone, that the Sheol question might be helpful. And here's my view of how Sheol will be emptied. Okay.
So just so people know, the grave is Sheol. It's not the area underneath. There is an area underneath called Tartarus, and that's rarely referenced, but it's there in Peter, I believe.
Right.
Before. So so that's the grave. Okay. So
so here's my eschatology in short, because I like Mike, I've not enjoyed eschatology most of my life. And so when I deal with it, I kind of go for the big stuff.
Right.
Then comes the end, 1 Corinthians 15, when Jesus delivers the kingdom to God the Father, when he puts an end to all rule and all authority. I think there's your
that's what I was citing, 15:24. Yep.
And there's your reference to the gods of the Old Testament, when Jesus will finally put an end to Ephesians 6 and the battle that you and I face every day. Even though Jesus rules, we still have trouble, right? And that's going to be at the end when God or Jesus ends all rule and authority and power. But then the last thing that happens, I find this so helpful. He must wait until he's put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that will be destroyed is death. And so now comes this theme. And here's my call. I'd be happy to hear your pushback. Sheol and Hades is this place, and Mike and I differed on this, so here we go.
Yeah.
Sheol and Hades have a zip code as much as heaven does. In other words, I don't think either one of them do. I think they're symbols for, in this case, Sheol and Hades are symbols of death and a place like in 1 Enoch 22. From there I went to another place, and he showed me in the west a great and high mountain of hard rock, and there were 4 hollow places in it, that the spirits of the souls of the dead might assemble there. In other words, it's almost like this architectural prison that he was envisioning. Okay. And so, in other words, and you can do this with numerous texts, and I'll show you in a second, that I think personally,
Yeah.
Sheol and Hades are symbols for a place of the dead, as much as what we call heaven today is a symbolic place for God's rule. Obviously, you don't go left of Neptune and find God sitting on a throne. Must be
You're not going to
symbolic some
heed
degree.
to the planet Kolob? That's a Mormon reference. Sorry.
Okay, see, that's where
that's where it comes from. Yeah.
I just think that as beautiful as heaven is as a concept, we have to keep in mind, and this comes from N.T. Wright and others too, so this isn't out of bounds too far, that heaven is a idea of God's place of rule, which is probably more like First Kings, was it 6, where he sees these horses on the side of the hill, and God gives him, in other words, somebody had a vision of these spirit horses that were out there because he needed to know that God was with him. I forget that reference. Remember that one?
I know my First Kings, and that's odd that I don't know that reference.
Or maybe it's Second Kings. I'm sure some of your listeners know what we're talking about. But somebody somebody's nervous about winning a war, and God opens his eyes to see horses on the horizon by the thousands. God's army, in other words, is there, but he can't see it. And I take that to be, of course, a vision of not reality. They're not spirit horses, but that God is just showing that there is, at the same time you and I live in this carbon-based existence, God is living in the same space as us, but in a different kind of ethers, a different kind of presence. And my point is that Sheol is the place of the dead as much as heaven is the place of God. So
interesting. Okay. All right.
So here's what happens then. Even in non-canonical stuff, and Mike was all about, Second Temple Jewish literature, and you can get it out of there as a lot there, that someday, this was coming out of Jewish literature of the Second Temple period, that Hades and Sheol, the place of the dead, will give up its residence. It will give them back to the earth, as though this is where resurrection will come into play. Revelation, now if you want to pick on that one too, you got Revelation 20 verse 13, Thanatos, death, and Hades delivered up the dead who were in them. So there's a theme. My point is this: there's a theme both in non-canonical literature and in the New Testament that someday, as Paul just said in 1 Corinthians 15, the last enemy that God is going to destroy is death itself. And so even at the end of Revelation 20, you have this Thanatos and Hades are cast into the lake of fire, which again, I take to be symbolic, which means, and again, Joel, here's just my final call on it, that as we go into Revelation 21, the new heavens and new earth, and we dwell with God forever, death itself will be a distant memory. We will live in a world that doesn't have it anymore because it was, quote unquote, thrown into the lake of fire. So that's as specific as I get. Now, I would be more than happy to hear your spins on things. But that's my eschatology.
Is that your last slide then?
Well,
Go with some more if you have more. That's fine. We have time. Don't worry.
You had mentioned, and I don't know what I've done with you before, but you had mentioned the red heifer ashes and things about atonement. I'm more than happy.
That's where we're going.
I have slides that show my view of atonement as well. That's really what got me, if I may say this again, in love, and I'm not frustrated by this at all because of God's providence, but this is what got me in trouble with my denomination was atonement, because atonement is a very protected doctrine today. I understand why. People have a very strong view usually of atonement and their view, and so do I. And so when you start comparing atonement views, I can see why people get nervous. And this, I mean, if you want me to show you what I believe, you'll see why.
Let me throw a couple of things by you, and then we'll pop your slides back up again see, and we'll do the point counterpoint and see how it goes.
Perfect.
So let me go ahead and make sure that I can represent. Oh, that is not what I want. I do not want a performance warning. So, okay, so let me just go back to this and see if I can get that. Okay, I might have a problem because I had popped mine up before, and now it's not allowing me.
Oh, so somebody mentioned 2 Kings 6:17. That's the horse.
That's what it would be 2 Kings. Thank you, people. We have smart people that watch our show. So, wow. Maybe what I should have done is kept my slides up instead, and just minimized it instead of taking it out. It is not allowing me to present again without, well, I can view the slide, and so I'll just have to read it to you. So let me just pop it up here. And so, okay, so the main thing is, no, I want to read this to you. So let me just fight for a couple more seconds here and see why it won't allow me to represent. Come on. What's it doing? Okay, replace, show, stop. No, that would stop you. I don't want to stop your slides.
Well, you probably have to. Maybe I should stop sharing. You know what?
Yeah, maybe. Oh, that's why I need to get you to. Yeah,
there we go.
Go ahead and take yours
stop
down.
sharing now.
Okay, now it's going to let me do that. I assume.
Put up anything you'd like. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm sure this device can handle it. Yes, it can. Screen share. Okay, there it is. Okay, so now we're fine. And so window entire screen, and boom, share. And we will go back to this and hide this. And so this is from John 11, 55 56. Okay, the Judean festival. So it's Jewish. But it is God's festival of Pesach, because that's how it's stated in Leviticus 23, was near. And many people went up from the country to Jerusalem to perform the purification ceremony. So that is the old red heifer celebration.
Of Leviticus or Numbers 19.
You got it. It's 19. Yes. Sprinkled by red heifer ashes. And that's typical. That's standard. That's what they were supposed to do prior to Pesach. So they would be in a state of corpse contamination.
Right.
And so they would.
And who wouldn't be, right? Yeah.
Everybody pretty much would be. I mean, you're going to be around death all the time. It's so easy to bump into death. Right. Prior to Pesach, they were looking for Yeshua as they stood in the temple courts. And so we know where it is too. They said to each other, what do you think? That he simply won't come to the festival? And he eventually arrives, and he has to. I mean, he would have been, I hate to put it this way, but sinning if he didn't go, because it is a commandment to go. Mm-hmm. And so he did, obviously. So the point is, there is this red heifer situation. And what is your take on the red heifer ashes? Because last week I had Byron Stinson on the show. He's the guy that found the red heifers and shipped them over to Israel, the 5, and now it's 4. And so, he feels God led him to do this. He's frustrated that they haven't done anything with it. But what's your take on that?
My nose is up against the window, excited what's going on inside, and I have no. In other words, I'm watching this kind of a conversation, I guess, from the outside looking in. But the red heifer in Jewish tradition, it comes again from Numbers 19, is that the ashes were used and stored for corpse contamination. And for some reason, again, well, the story kind of peters out in the text. You don't have much said about it there, but Jewish tradition is, and you get into 10 heifers is kind of this model.
We've had 9 so far. We're waiting for the 10th.
Yes. Right. Yes. And so. I've been to Israel 8 times. Wow. I'm going again in November to lecture on. I've been invited to do lectures, Divine Council lectures on a Israel tour that's centered on archaeology. So I can't wait to do that.
Oh, that'll be fun! Oh, yeah. Wow!
But what's fun about going to Jerusalem itself is going down the little city streets and tucking your head in these shops, several of which are Hasidic Jewish groups waiting to build the third temple, and they've got the vestments of the high priest ready to go. One guy brought them out, showed me. They are more than excited. Again, they're small groups, but they're very vocal that they can't wait to somehow get back up on the temple.
They're wearing patches. They've got flags everywhere about the third temple, everywhere.
I asked one of them, how do you know when this third temple will be built? I mean, what needs to be done? And he said, well, this is his view. Again, he's saying this under his breath in his little shop. Someday, even if it's just me going up in the stealth of night and putting together an altar up on that Temple Mount by myself, that'll count. In other words, nobody knows, even in their world, what counts as the third temple. But God bless them, they're still waiting for, that temple to be rebuilt. And so I'm all for that. I have no problem with Jews getting excited to have the ability, the political ability and so forth to get up there on that Temple Mount and retake it. Was your question more specific than that?
Well, I'd like you to also talk about the third temple in terms of, do you think it will be the temple of the Antichrist, or do you think it will be just a temple where they're doing things like the red heifer
Oh,
type stuff?
yeah. Now that's again where my nose is up against the window, because I've heard ideas like is
Yeah.
it Daniel 11, the idea that this Antichrist figure will do some terrible things.
Right.
Second Thessalonians, he will be as God in the temple, and those kind of things are, and I'm not good at this, so help me out, Joel.
Okay.
But
That you're doing great.
I don't know. Again, every generation has always thought theirs was the last, and wouldn't it be cool if ours was the last and we get to see this? I have $10. That's probably not going to happen, but let's see what happens. But I don't know. I would love to hear different positions, and I would enjoy hearing them all.
Would you be intrigued if you arrived there and they had a tabernacle of some sort? Maybe a chuppah, which would be a wedding type of a covering, and just an altar. I mean, when I read Revelation 11, I see the people worshiping there, which means that's a good thing. They're worshiping, and it's
Uh,
kadosh in the
yeah,
Hebrew Revelation. And then also you see the altar described and the naos. And you're a Greek guy, so you know what a
yep,
naos is. So
yep,
that would be the holy of holies, as far as I'm concerned. Do you agree
yep.
with me?
I can see that. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, if you've been to Israel, if you're going, go down to the Western or the Wailing Wall, they call it the
Yeah.
Western Wall, and talk to the Jews that are there. Wonderful conversations. This is my opinion, Joel, that
Right.
God is as active at that wall and in the faith of those people as he is in a Baptist church.
Okay.
Again, we have to deal with the Jesus only issue. I understand that John 14:6 counts for something.
Right.
I do believe Jesus is the Messiah. But when you talk to the people who are down at that wall praying, and you talk to them individually and get their opinions about what they're saying to this God and what they want, I mean, it's just spiritually delightful. I
They're
can't.
starting to read Torah, and the
Oh yeah,
Orthodox are birthing babies and teaching Torah, and that is the foundation. I mean, I'm a
yeah,
messianic, so obviously I read Torah too.
yep,
Um, so the bottom line is they're getting excited about the Bible and God. And this is going to sound weird, Ron, but just go ahead and hear me out. So
yep.
Byron was on last week, and he was there when they slaughtered the wrong red heifer, but he thought it was the right one. So he grasped some of the ashes from this red heifer that was burned, and was disqualified, but he still grabbed the ashes. He used them with his daughter, who was dying of heart issues, horrible heart issues.
Huh.
It healed her,
Wow.
and he's used it
Yeah.
on other people. I don't know. I mean, it's not the right red heifer. It's not the right process. It's
Yeah.
not on the Mount of Olives. It's not any of the above, but it worked.
I'm going to say 3 cheers and God
Yeah.
bless. I mean,
Yeah. That's what I
I'll
said.
give both sides of this
Yeah. There
because
you go.
I I'm not good at this on that part of it. So I'm fascinated by it. So
Okay, so this is going to happen. Now, you and I might agree on what Israel is, in terms of this is Ezekiel 36:23 through 27, but it
okay,
does seem to be red heifer related, and it
okay,
does seem to be related to the new covenant, so to speak. So the nations will know that I am Adonai, says Adonai Elohim. And you would state that there is a differentiation. They're already aware of these gods or Elohim that they have in their particular regional locations, but they need to know that he's the one and only, right?
exactly. Yep.
Okay. When before their eyes I am set apart, kadosh is probably the word there,
Good.
through you to be regarded as kadosh. For
Yep.
I will take you from among the nations, gather you from the countries, that's occurring right now, and
Yep.
return you to your own soil. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I'm arguing that's the red heifer. I don't know
Okay.
your thoughts there.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Again, as strong as Numbers 19 is about this practice, I don't mind at all that would be brought up here. By the time I'll just throw this in, that by the time you get to Jesus, I think this is a whole new subject, Joel. So maybe we shouldn't
Go.
go down this path, but Jesus is so shockingly non-ritualistic in his teaching. The Beatitudes to the woman in
Yeah.
Samaria, whatever. He is so given to loyalty to Yahweh above all other Elohim that by the time you get to Paul, then he's also quite non-ritualistic in his speeches to Gentiles. around the Western Mediterranean.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just saying the red heifer issue would be on their mind, but it wouldn't be front teaching, because all they need is Jesus to be righteous. And so now the story of how this heifer works would be, shall we say, the mechanics in the engine of the Porsche.
Okay.
Jesus is driving the Porsche, and get in and enjoy the ride. How does this work? Some of the mechanics I would put in the engine illustration would be maybe a red heifer issue.
I'm hoping that the listeners will understand that we're formulating our opinions on this too, as we see things progress.
We're always test driving. Yeah.
We're test driving. So the bottom line is, it seems as though this is going to occur. It seems like it's biblical too. I mean, this is how I interpret the end of days in terms of Ezekiel 36's portion. And then everybody knows about Ezekiel 38, 39 with the Gog-Magog war. I will cleanse you from all your uncleanness and from your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit inside you. I'm sure that's Ruach. I will take the stony heart out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my Ruach again inside you and cause you to live by my laws. I assume it's Torah. I don't know. Respect my rulings. I think that is Huk, which is stuff that we don't understand, that he said, just do it and stop complaining. And then obey them. And so, there are different types of things. There's mishpatim, which are more written out and codified, and they could be human or godly. But then there's the adut, which is witnessing, witness of, whatever else. But the third one is that Huk one. And the red heifer is a Huk. We don't understand it, but he requires it. It's in the text. And Yeshua did not rebuke people on the last slide. He did not rebuke them here in John 11 and say, no, you don't need any of that stuff. It's just me. He did allow the Torah to be interpreted, whether they, obviously we all know that the high priest bought the position, but he did allow this to follow through. He only seemed to have a huge problem with certain Pharisaic interpretations and with buying and selling on the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
And maybe for other things. Yeah. What?
Yeah, I was going to say, Paul will famously in Romans 14 allow Jews to be Jews and Gentiles to be Gentiles, and say, if you follow the day, good. If you don't follow the day, don't worry. So, and by the way, again, are you familiar with the Messianic church or whatever in Hudson?
Oh yeah, they're very close friends. Daniel Lancaster, good. Aaron Eby, buddies.
Lancaster, and I visited there. Oh man, it's 10 years ago now, but had an enjoyable Shabbat with them, and just enjoyed the day. And I felt bad that I kind of went back to my Gentile church because I enjoyed what I saw. I really did. I enjoyed it totally.
I was there when you were there, more than likely. I was there from 2011 to 2016-ish. Yeah. Good.
Now, my point is that if Paul had been with us and gone out to lunch with us after that, and he knew I was heading back to my Baptist church, next week, he'd say, here's the point, guys, we're on the same team, really, because you get to be a Gentile. You really do. And you don't have to follow the law. And you also get to be a Jew if you want to be a Jew. No problem there either, because that's a wonderful thing too. So this would be another podcast, but how does
I want you back again.
How does a Gentile and Jew get along? I think Paul was the answer. He was constantly trying to get both sides to agree it's all Jesus, And,
okay. So let's go to another New Testament verse that sounds a lot like this. So we're going to go to Hebrews 9:12 through 14.
Yeah, and he even mentions the heifer there,
Yeah, it does sound like it. But let's see. I'm going to add you can see the brackets, my comments. Okay. And he entered not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by the means of his own blood, thus setting people free forever. For if sprinkling ceremonially unclean, that is the Tameh peoples, of the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of the heifer restores their outward purity, that would be the word tahor, that is ritually pure, then how much more the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself to God as a sacrifice without blemish, to purify our conscience from works that lead to death, so that they can serve the living God. Your thoughts?
I love this because, and this would get into my view of atonement, that atonement language in the New Testament is access language. It's not salvational language. In other words,
Okay. Yep.
because in their world,
Amen.
when you came to Jerusalem, well, let's back up. If Paul was coming to my city, let's say I lived in Philippi,
Yeah.
and he told me that I needed to believe in the Jewish Messiah, and I'm a Gentile, my first reaction would be, let's say it was a positive one, like Lydia. Oh, good, I will do that. I believe that Jesus is the fulfillment of Torah and that he is the one to whom I need to give my allegiance. When can we go to Jerusalem? That'd be my next question, because how do you worship a God in that era? You go to the temple of that deity.
Yep.
And Paul would say, and I'm just going to fill in, put my brackets now on this question. Paul would say, here's the beauty of it, Lydia. You don't need to go to Jerusalem. Romans 12:1, the sacrifices now are a living sacrifice. That is your rational worship now. Your reasonable way of worshiping is simply giving your body as a living sacrifice. It's all symbolic now. So that as a Gentile, I get to stay in Thessalonica, stay in Philippi, and worship the Jewish Messiah, which in their world was bizarre that I could do it from that distance. But here's the key. How am I then brought into the family of Abraham? How am I made kadosh? How am I made holy if I don't sacrifice to the God of Israel in Jerusalem? Well, there's the death of Jesus. It fits perfectly in. So now I can take a verse like this, and I can teach my Gentile friends and my Jewish friends as well, but especially the Gentile who doesn't have a means of sacrifice available to him.
No.
And say that the blood of Jesus now acts as your access to the family of Abraham, to the symbolic Holy of Holies, whatever, however deep you want to go on that level. But that to me is where, again, and by the way, I'm having flashbacks of these conversations with pastor search committees that are saying, what are you talking about? Because of course,
I knew you would bump into the wall with this. Yeah.
In the evangelical
right
world. Yeah. In the Reformed world, which is mainly evangelical, the death of Jesus satiates the wrath of God against Genesis 3 original sin.
Wow.
In this view that I think this is
what I'm presenting. Yes.
Okay. And here's where I am. I've been here for 20 years. That when Jesus died, he didn't satiate God's wrath against Genesis 3. He opened, well, I'm just quoting verses now. He opened up the Holy of Holies. He said, come on in. You get to be, no matter who you are, Jew or Gentile, accessing the God of Israel because of what Jesus did. So that to me, like I say, atonement language in the New Testament is access language. And that is huge to them. It's not as big to us because in our Reformed models of evangelicalism, we always think of the wrathful God sending people to hell. That's the problem that needs to be solved. And I'd say in the New Testament, the problem that needs to be solved is access to the Jewish God. How in the world does a Gentile without Torah have access? Well, there's your Jesus coming right in between saying, I am the one that died for you. So
how do you process Zechariah 8:23, which is grabbing onto the hem of the garment, which is, it's the zeets that you see here.
I don't know. I'm going to just punt from experience on that one. I don't know.
Zechariah 8:23 kind of mentions that in that time frame, there's a lot of Bayom Hahus going on there, which is, code word for the end of days.
Let us go with you.
A Gentile. Yeah. Let us go with
you.
Yeah.
Well, the gathering of the Gentiles in late Isaiah and a lot of the minor prophets, there is this theme running of God gathering. And this is Galatians 6:10. The Israel of God, I think, is a phrase only once in the Bible, the Israel of God, where Paul even spins a phrase that is new to his readers, thinking, what do we mean Israel of Yahweh or Israel of God? It's the nations. I mean, we're talking people that, let me again say it again.
Yeah.
The problem of Acts is not how to get saved. It's how to get people in church and get along, how to get people who are from different nations and a Cornelius and a Peter to, just have coffee. That's the problem that they're trying to solve. And why is that? Because, Zechariah 8 and the problem that led to it is to bring nations together. The first thing they're going to have to deal with is impurity. That's how a Jew thinks. That's how God thinks. That's how
I think. Yes.
Exactly.
But I have no way to rectify it.
Well, you can't. Yeah, but Jesus solves it. That's, I think, what Hebrews does is it gives the long, enveloped language or explanation of how, especially to a Gentile mind, how do I go from as a Gentile into the worship of a Jewish Messiah?
Right.
I do it through the sacrifice of that Messiah for me. And it's, like I say, access language that to them is so important.
Okay. Now we're going to shift to the left-hand side here. You might actually know this guy, Hebrew for
Okay.
Christians, John. I'm blanking on his last name right now, but he did his description here of death is tamei and tahor is, ending this defilement. There are blood rituals that sanctify you, and then there's kadosh, which is another level above just tahor. So I would say kadosh, or maybe being a zadik, which is righteous.
Yeah.
That would be a level above just being ritually pure. Ritually
Yeah.
pure gets you into a closer level to, say, the temple and things like that, but
Right.
it doesn't mean you're saved or
No.
anything like that.
Yeah. Righteousness and cleanliness are two different things in my mind.
Yeah. So what I want to cite is below that, Ezekiel 44:23. And
Okay.
Ezekiel starts out with the prince. Only the prince can enter through this gate. So it's kind of coded for that's the Messiah coming back again. And Ezekiel 40-48 talks about this third temple, we'll call it, and
Okay.
the activities with the Messiah. But so then by the time we move on to 23, you see, and they shall teach my people the difference between the Kodesh and the Kol, the common, and cause them to discern between the tamei, which is ritually impure, and the tahor, which is ritually pure. So
Okay.
it seems like at some point in time, we're going to bring that back. I don't know how it factors in with Yeshua, but he's obviously there because he was cited in the first 3 verses of chapter 44.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
And I'm thinking if Peter and Cornelius had this text in front of them over coffee, how would they deal with it? Because again, Cornelius has no access to the temple, and that's Peter's problem. How can I have lunch with you if you can't be tamei?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, if Jesus could walk into the
tahor,
room, he'd say that was the reason I died, was to
Right.
gather, John 11:52, to gather the family together, to make sure that we don't have to deal with this ritual language anymore. Or, and this John 4 to me, how Jesus tells the woman of Samaria, someday, if not even now, you can worship on either hill and God will allow this. So I respect this language. I think we're, by the time you get to Paul traversing, the Grecian islands, trying to tell people about Jesus, he was beyond the question of whether ritual purification was necessary. But that's, again, how I read Paul.
Okay. Now, I want to contrast this because we've got Passover coming up and Easter. Easter I view as the resurrection day. I don't know exactly which day he died. We're not going to do that tonight. But the main thing is, I want to point out the fact that it echoes off another celebration, which is Yom Kippur. Well, it's a celebration because everybody repents during that time frame. It's the time of teshuvah, repentance, turning, and it's 40 days leading up to Yom Kippur. That's coming up this fall. But the main point is that you have the bull for the high priest that is slaughtered. Then you have one goat that turns towards the high priest and one goat that turns away. You'll see that on Calvary. You'll see the bull, technically, the Yeshua in the middle, and one thief turns towards him and one thief turns away from him. And so to
me, you're doing midrash when you do this. You're seeing a story and it works. In a beautifully symbolic way.
Yeah. So when you see Yom Kippur, you should be thinking, oh, that sounds just like Passover. That sounds like when he was, offered up on the cross. Now, what I want you to do is answer this for the people while we, look at this picture. But your comment was Jesus' resurrection is directly applied to the end of death by the first church. And even Mike agrees with you. Thus is the greatest argument for conditional immortality. What's that?
Yeah, this gets into the 4 views on hell and this kind of thing, that evangelicalism has traditionally been very strong on eternal conscious torment. And I understand why. That's how I was raised as a Baptist pastor's kid, right? That to reject God in this life, to reject Jesus in this life, and especially because of original guilt, you will have to repay that in some eternal way. And so that's the logic of eternal conscious torment. It's not that anyone likes that view, because, even your worst enemy, I can't imagine the pain that would be. So no one likes the view just philosophically, nor, and here's where we have to get careful and people get frustrated, I think, nor do we turn away from eternal conscious torment just because we don't like it. That's not why you turn away from it. let's all, shall we say, this is where Mike and I, when we would talk, this is why I love him so much. We would try to reset, just reset. Don't take any church father in this. Just go with the text. Is it possible? And then you test drive ideas and see which ones, run out of gas before you get very far. The conditional immortality idea is fascinatingly interesting to me because it seems to purr all the way through the text, and it never has a problem. Here's what happens in my mind. God says to Adam and Eve, you're going to go into a world of carbon-based existence, which it just naturally, to die and to come back to life is spring and fall and winter and summer. That's just how I made the earth work, including the human body. So in this view, death is not a sinful problem. It's a carbon problem. And carbon is the way of the world. That's why humans have children, because we are simply passing on to the next generation. Taken that way, sin is understood to be a problem. It's Hebrews 2. It's the realm of Satan. In other words, it's almost like this personal capital S figure that likes to hunt us down and kill us. And that's how it's sometimes pictured in the Bible, that sin and death kind of work in tandem as this hunter who comes up and grabs you and takes you down, because whether by accident or disease, people die at strange times. And that's so death is a problem. I'm trying to cut it very carefully here. Death is a problem, but it's not evil. It's just the way that God made the world work, whether animals, plants, or humans. Okay. That's where I am so far. Now, as you go through the Old Testament, people die and they don't really know what happens after death. You have enough in the Psalms and in Job and so forth, where death is a still lurking enemy, but you don't really know what you do there. And so Sheol has this kind of murky feel to it that it's not happy, obviously, but neither is it eternal conscious torment. Okay. So even Judaism, as I understand it, has this view of the afterlife of Sheol as a kind of a musty, dirty, pauper and prince alike are going to be living there, and it's not happy, but that's just how death is. And again, it's just thought of symbolically that way. Here comes Jesus, and what he solves is always going to be the first question on any plan of salvation invitation. What did Jesus come to solve? In the traditional view that I grew up with, he came to solve original guilt of Genesis 3. He came to take me from hell. Well, here, you know what? Can I show you a slide?
Yeah. It's time. I'll take this down. I want to make sure that I leave mine up somewhat, though. But I can give you control. So,
because it's my next slide.
Not what I want. You know what? I'm just going to take it down because we can. Yeah, don't worry. I can hide it and we'll get it back up again. Okay, there you go. It should be clean for you now. See what happens when you try to pull yours up. Oh, I have to add to the scene. That's the problem. Okay.
Yeah. So in back when I was at Pillsbury and we gave you tracts, when we wrestled against you. Okay. Our tract invited you to heaven by getting over hell, and hell, of course, is eternal conscious torment. And we would describe Jesus' death, his cross, as a means of traversing over to heaven because of his death. Jesus paid for our sins, so forth. And we've all heard that. So that's the story that I'm saying I don't agree with. In other words, and I guess we can, that was as simple as that.
That's going to get you kicked out of the pastorate. So
I can stop sharing right there if you want to put yours back up. But
okay. All right. Okay.
The point is that view of going from one precipice to another, you have to get rid of that, because does anyone in the Bible think that way? I would say no. What they do think of is in terms of death being final, and what can we do to solve death? There comes Jesus to me. That what Jesus does principally, obviously, of all the many things he does and teaches and so forth, and his death does many things, the resurrection does many things, but the principal problem that Jesus solves is death, because that's the principal problem that humans have.
I don't think he solves sin as much as he solves death. I think.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, we have to define sin there, but we have to define it. But my point is that sin and death often work in kind of this tandem personification of, like I say, coming up and grabbing you and pulling you down into Sheol. That's how it's often thought of. But yeah, you're right that the question that Jesus came to solve is, can humans live forever? Conditional immortality is defined this way. My atheist friend, and I have a good one that I I used to do debates with, and what I liked about it was he's the president of Minnesota Atheists. I think he still is.
Oh, that
And
guy. Yeah. I've heard of him before.
and what I liked about him was that he was very honest, he was kind, and we didn't debate as much as have a conversation in front of people and in churches and things and atheist groups. The people that got most upset with me were not the atheists, they were the Christians. They'd come up
Really?
afterwards and say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you say this? And my point was, well, I'm not here to get him. He knows all my arguments. I'm here to talk to him in front of you and just see what a conversation is. And I always did this with him in front of, didn't matter the audience. The basic difference between me and August, in my opinion, is that I'm going to live forever and he is going to die. He is going to just pass out of existence. And yet, see, and here's the thing. He agreed with me that his worst fear is death, not hell, but death.
It's death.
And he lives with that fear.
It's death.
But he's made atonement for it. I mean, or what should I say? He's made his peace with death, as most
I don't know if you ever really make your peace with
I know, but you can say it now, but I know
there are these horrible near-death experiences where they go nuts.
But conditional immortality means we're all born with the condition of mortality. And I am through Jesus' resurrection by participating in the life of Jesus. And then you get into a whole bunch of discussion on how this works. But the resurrection of Jesus is attributed in the New Testament to my eternal life. I will live forever because he does. And notice that my atheist, what's going to happen to him? He will tip over and stop breathing. That's all that's going to happen to him. I will tip over and live again. That's what Jesus solved. So conditional immortality simply says we're all born mortal, and you get immortality conditionally by believing, giving your loyalty to Jesus, who resurrected from the dead for you. So that's how I take it. Notice how I'm not running away from eternal conscious torment because I don't like it. No. I'm attempting to figure out the story of the biblical narrative and what they were fearing and what Jesus came to solve. And it works for me all the way through. And like you say, 1 Corinthians 15, the end of the story is death is abolished. To me, that shows that.
So that must have been the beginning for me. And we disagree just slightly on this. I'm more of a Heiserite in this view that really what occurred then was this Nakash, we call him, the snake, whatever, serpent, showed up. And he fell beforehand, or he tempted Adam and Eve, and that brought death into the world. Not necessarily sin. So I don't like to ascribe everything on sin because it's just a crutch, Ron. Even the atheist, if you use the argument of sin with him, he wouldn't get it. But you use the argument of death.
And I understand why. Yeah.
But he gets death.
Totally.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a better argument. So what introduced into the world with Adam and Eve was death and the grave, which is part of that. And what is killed, and you cited it already, Revelation 20, cites that death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire. That's the most disgusting thing. Sin, for me, there's levels in Judaism. There's kata type offerings that are basically, your wife bleeds one time a month and she has to go in and get sprinkled with the red heifer. And what did she do wrong? Nothing, but there was a contamination, the death of the egg. And so, boom, corpse contamination. So then also there are times when you're around dead people and you need to be cleansed of that, made to whore. So the bottom line is it's death that's the problem. And it seems like the death of Yeshua on the cross is the answer to Adam and Eve bringing death into the world.
Fair enough. I think Paul would love that midrash. I mean, he would say, I like your application to this. Yeah.
And so Yeshua being the form of life is defeating death, so to speak. And it's there in the text. It's just, I can't remember if it's exactly saying defeating death, but it doesn't matter. He kills it in the end. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Back up here. Okay, so there are goals of the Mashiach, the Messiah, when he arrives. There's a bunch of things. These are some Jewish, some Christian, but restoring the kingdom of Israel. And there are 12 tribes. There are many people involved in that. And if we're grafted in, say through Romans 11, then we're in. Okay, and if we don't have a tribe name, we're in through Judah. Okay, because Jesus was a Judean. Rebuilding the third temple, I would argue that's Ezekiel 40 through 48, not
Okay.
necessarily what's occurring right now. Bringing world peace, sounds great. Spreading monotheism, which I would argue is just a cod. It's John 17. It's that Yeshua and his Father were one in God's Spirit. So, just how he would phrase it, establishing justice and righteousness, establishing the new covenant, where we kind of already went through Ezekiel 36, but Jeremiah 31 talks about the heart changes. And so we're not quite there yet. We may say new covenant, but there are some things that will occur yet. Offer salvation, eternal life, reveal God's will, perform miracles and demonstrate authority, redeem humanity. I'm arguing he is called the Messiah, also the Goel Hadam. So Goel is redeemer, and Hadam, the blood. And so there has to be something related to blood and death that he has to redeem. And this is Jewish, the Goel Hadam. They see that the Mashiach has to kill death. Well, they see it a little piece in Isaiah 28:15. You've made a covenant with death. And Hades. And so it seems like they're sensing that they want to get rid of this death and the grave too. And then, of course, the resurrection and reunite the two sticks into one. But it's intriguing. Even though Yeshua was very peaceful during his first arrival, he's going to be fighting against Gog Magog in the end. And he's coming in with, that's why I did the picture with the blood everywhere on him. He's coming in fighting this time. And so it's a different Yeshua than we've known in the past.
I agree there.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's move. It's busy. We won't go through this. We don't have the time. Basically, just so people can see this on the calendar today, we are the 18th. On the 19th, well, actually right now, we should be at Rosh Chodesh, which should be Nisan 1. Technically, the tabernacle was set up on that day by Moses, and that should be Exodus 40. Then the next day is the red heifer, so Nisan 2. If you are going to see something, just be aware of it, people. Just watch the world, and if something happens, it happens. If it doesn't, we move forward. Then we're going to have Passover. Then just keep in mind, as you move forward into Easter, that's on the 5th of April.
Right.
On the 4th, we're going to have a comet hitting the sun and potentially creating large fireworks. Okay. So we'll have auroras coming up in the next day or so here too. So it's going to be rather interesting to watch the world. So, and blood moons have been occurring. We just had one, a month ago during Purim, and we'll have another one coming up during the summer, August. So leading up to that time frame, we mentioned Teshuvah, the 40 days of repentance. What I wanted to cite is that things are happening fast in Israel. I mentioned, the first day of Nisan with erecting the tabernacle. That is Exodus 40. Yep. And then the second day is the red heifer, according to the rabbis, and that a rocket landed on the Temple Mount on the 16th of March. And if they blow things up, things will move. So it's good to have a guy like Ron available that will help explain things, because you actually understand the reason between Tahor and Tameh and how Yeshua is that blood sacrifice. Good stuff. So once again,
has Iran or any, I'm just thinking they know World War III starts if they bomb the Temple Mount, right?
They want it. It's their eschatology. Iran has that Shiite 12er, we call them. They're the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. They truly believe they need to. Do you remember Ahmadinejad from the 2000s?
Not really.
He was from Iran. He was constantly trying to stir the pot to start World War III so that they could hasten the Mahdi. Just be aware of it. So anyway, that particular missile landed, and have you been close to the Temple Mount area?
I've been up on top several times. Yeah.
Did you see the Dome of the Spirits? That little.
That little thing on the left. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, you've seen it before.
Oh yeah.
It was close, really close. Now this is a Joelism, people, but that is the place that I think is the Holy of Holies.
Oh, they are.
That is specifically
I've heard
cited. That. Yeah. So they call it the Dome of the Spirits. They also call it oh goodness, the Dome of the Rocks, not the Dome of the Rocks, but something specific to of the tablets, the Dome of the tablets. So
Okay.
it would be like Moses tablets.
Could
So
be.
just be aware that those things are occurring. And then we read the Red Heifer Parsha just the other day here on 3/7. But keep in mind that 320 would be that day if they were going to offer it again. They offered one, but it wasn't the same thing. The main thing is I'm making a point that I think the red heifer represents death and hell.
Hmm.
And so Yeshua is the ultimate sacrifice, but up until that time, the red heifer takes care. It's like a down payment on destroying death and hell, if that makes sense.
So why? Here's an honest question, then, Joel.
Yeah.
If Jesus is the ultimate red heifer, why do we need another one?
For some reason, it's part of prophecy.
Okay.
I believe that we will have a situation. I'll describe it this way. There's Zechariah 2 and Revelation 11, where we have these measurements occurring on the Temple Mount area. And there will be a court of the Jews, a court of the Gentiles. There will be a court of the women. There will be these various courts. And so you will need to have, so Yeshua is salvific, okay? But there's still Tahor and Tameh. And so I guess, obviously there's nothing salvific in the red heifer's ashes. And even the Jews would know that. It comes from faith. Whether you're citing Luther there or yeah.
Another honest question then is, do I as a Gentile need to be concerned about the red heifer?
If you want to march into the Temple Mount area, I don't know how it's going to work out, but I think you would need to have corpse contamination alleviated. I don't know how that works out, but it looks like, leave the court of the Gentiles out in Revelation 11, for it will be trampled for, I think, 42 months.
Right.
So, there could be a millimeter of space between the court of the Gentiles and what is considered holy.
I see. Okay.
It's just intriguing. And so we already talked about the red heifers, and we had Byron on last week. And we don't need to go through these verses. I wanted to take us forward into what Heiser talked about all the time was demons are disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and he called them Ruach Tameh. He called them unclean spirits. Right. And he cited, and I'll just head forward. So he called them, he found a Dead Sea Scroll that said, demons, offspring of man and seed of holy ones, a clear reference to the disembodied spirits of the divine human offspring. That's a quote directly from Heiser. But Ruach, so bastard spirits, demons, we'll talk about chimera some other time, but basically the red heifer prefigured Yeshua as that cleansing, but still we had to get rid of the demons somehow, and they're bastard spirits. Do you have any thoughts on Heiserisms and things like that relating
on
to
that one? I often told him I wasn't there, just for reasons of, when you get into the Enoch stuff, it's like 218 of them. There's not a vast number of them. It seems to be a very limited, the story of Enoch is very specific beyond just the Nephilim spirits becoming demons. It gets into a number of them and their names and so forth. It's so specific for me that I tend to think, based on how demons show up in the Old Testament in Psalm 106 and Deuteronomy 33, they are equated to, again, the Shadim in Hebrew. We're not sure what they are, but they seem to be Elohim in some way that are worshipped by Canaanites. And so for me, it's just too specific. And my angelology, if you want to call it that, works without having to do that. I don't mind the view, but to me, it's not necessary for my overall angelology.
And this is his whole workflow. Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim are produced. And then I'm not that familiar with what Apkallu is, but it's the Babylonian spirit that was related to this. And then there are the Anakim and the Rephaim, according to Deuteronomy 2:11. And then it heads over into First Enoch, the villainous sons of God, and Genesis 6:1-4 are not only called angels, they are called watchers. Linked to Mesopotamian, Apkallu is transparent and unmistakable. That's obviously Heiser. Enoch, watchers and their offspring were source of demons. Again, And then he cites all the Enochian chapters. They will become evil upon the earth and shall be called evil spirits. And then that heads forward into, once again, first Enoch, bastard spirits, and things like that. So basically, he's got his workflow. It's all based on Heiser. And then he also said there's a Qumran fragment that said Watchers had a serpentine appearance, which sounds a lot like Genesis 3.
Yeah, and the serpentine goes. There's a book on the snake of Genesis 3 by James Charlesworth. It's 600 pages. It's the serpentine figure is very prevalent throughout the ancient world, the Mesopotamian ancient world, figuring evil, and a demonic spirit. So I don't think it's limited. In fact, the spirit of Revelation 12, the great dragon. Yep. There you have a serpentine being. Now, is that Leviathan pulled back out of Job into Revelation 12, or is that Genesis 3? There's the debate there, that the great serpent of old, is that Leviathan, or is that the snake of Genesis 3? We just don't know.
Yeah, it's good stuff, though. Okay, so you've seen this chart before. I created it. Unfortunately, I've moved my arrows at times. But the bottom line is, Heiser had the 3, what we call falls. You disagree with him, but that's fine. But he, there is that Genesis 3, and I equate it to Revelation 9. And you said the 214. Well, there are 200 egregores, they're called, plus one King Apollo, or maybe including one King Apollo. They bring the stinging pain and things like that, but not death to humans.
Yeah.
And I'm arguing that King Apollo is Azazel, and he is located just east of Jerusalem, and he's underneath the ground in this particular location right here, which is, boom, there's Jerusalem, there's Mount Azazel, there's Qumran over there. And you've been through some of these areas, but you've never looked for anything like this.
I've never looked for Azazel. I've been in Qumran numerous times, but where do I find Azazel?
Azazel is not that far away. You could walk that from Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah.
And so they have to. So let's see if I have the slide. No, I'm sorry. I did not include that in here. So anyway, there were other slides, but I cut it down, obviously. The main thing is you have to walk the scapegoat out of Jerusalem, and you would want to walk it someplace close. And it's odd that they call it Mount Azazel. And it's located 14 kilometers southeast of Jerusalem, near a wilderness. It's also called Mount Mutar.
Interesting.
But it's just intriguing that might match up, Ron. And, in our lifetimes, it's possible. Now, I'm a futurist, obviously, and you may not be. But that there would be a Revelation 9 situation where these things would pop out and start stinging people that don't have the seal of God. Yude.
I do believe Revelation is giving the future in some way. Now, sometimes it's symbolic, but I think it is future.
Okay, so I'm arguing it's possible that this would be the location, because that seems to be where they annihilated the scapegoat.
Okay.
And that seems to be that location. Moving forward, because we're kind of running out of time. But this is still part of it in terms of bind Azazel hand and foot, throw him into this particular place. It's called Tartarus by Peter, 2 Peter 2:4. And so it seems like that would be the place to put him, which would be called Mount Azazel.
Cool.
Okay. Then the next one is we move on to Revelation 9, the rest of the chapter, starting in, I think, verse 14, we've got this weird story of Gilgamesh from 2003, where they were going to unearth him, so to speak. And so there seems to be 17-foot tall giants mentioned in there. They sound like Nephilim. They sound like Rephaim and Anuki. They sound like chimeras, too. There's Nimrod involved, Gilgamesh, and Kinu. I don't remember that. Anyway, lots of weird things going on, but Revelation 9 does state the exact location, underneath the Euphrates River. Okay. Could this be related, Ron?
Could be. I'm hearing this for the first time, so I'd have to think it through. That's fascinating.
It's called a 200 million person army, and they're kind of chimeras too. I mean, they're described. They look like sulfur, and they've got the big chests. They're bizarre creatures, and I think it does mention here 200 million, and so breastplates of fire, Jacinth, brimstone, heads of horses, heads of lions, out of their mouths proceeded fire, smoke. I mean, that sounds like a chimera to me. Does it sound like it to you?
I don't know chimeras enough to give a judgment, but I'm fascinated by it.
But they are, so the four angels, messengers, Malachim, or Angelos, are who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And I'm thinking that might be that place near Babylon.
Yeah, right. That's where it is.
Or possibly where Gilgamesh was going to be found. It is conspiracy. It's weird. But George Bush, when he found out that they were going to dig up the tomb of Gilgamesh, he said, no, we're not going to. And he started a war in Iraq. So
yeah,
I know it sounds weird, but it did occur. And so same month, March, April of 2003, he declared the war. So it's odd. So there you go. Epic of Gilgamesh and the Iraq War, same exact moment. And the archaeologists in 2003 were working there. They stumbled upon what they believed to be the long-lost tomb of the mystical king Gilgamesh, protagonist of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories in human beings have ever written, and 17-foot tall giants, crossbreed between a normal human and Mesopotamian goddess. It sounds biblical if you read Revelation 9. So we know the location. We don't know if it's tied in with Gilgamesh, but it's odd, isn't it?
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Once again, more from Babylon and Ninurta and things like that. But they look somewhat similar to what we're describing in Revelation 9.
Right.
And the location too. Okay. So then the next thing is we have Revelation 12. We have this great sign in the skies. And then we also have the Satan kicked out. And so there seems to be an angelic fall at some point in time, and they'll be angry. I mean, Satan is very angry at that point in time. And so I'm arguing, I don't know how, but it seems like there are portals that will allow these angelic beings through. And I'm arguing this. It's Heiser's great showdown.
Okay. Revelation 12. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That this sets up the showdown. You have to have human beings around to witness. You have to have these fallen beings. Then I would claim it's like narcissism, exposing narcissists. These fallen beings, they had so much power, they had so much greatness. They were, like Ezekiel 28 or Isaiah 14. How you have been the object of beauty and perfection, and look at you. And so I'm arguing that Heiser is correct with that, but I'm arguing that it occurs here in the Shrine of Pan.
Okay.
Caesarea Philippi, in this location. It's Mount Hermon.
Right. And
that God has to have the great showdown with these, and I'm paraphrasing Isaiah 24:21, which talks about that there will be the Zava of Merom, Ha-Merom, Ba-Merom. So they are located not in the Shemayim, not in the heavens. They're located kind of just above the mountaintops in the Merom location. And then he will judge them. So these are the Zava, which would be angelic or warriors that either worked for God or used to work for God. Plus the kings, the Malachim, Ba-Merom, or Adama of the earth and of the ground. So he's going to judge the angelic type beings and the kings of the earth in Isaiah 24:21. Could it be here, Ron?
Could be, certainly. I mean, that's usually where we go through this. When we visit this site, this is the place to read about the giving up of God's kingdom to created spirits and how evil it got, and where Jesus does the great Caesarea Philippi promise about the gates of hell. So
it's also the Transfiguration location, isn't it?
Could be. Yeah, we're not sure which mountain it is, but obviously Hermon has a good tradition behind it.
Yep. Wouldn't it be intriguing to have the Transfiguration occurring above these, the shrine to Caesar, the shrine to Pan, the temple to Zeus, the dance floor of the sacred goats. I mean, it would be intriguing for them to be meeting up above and meet with
Yep.
Moses and Eliyahu.
Fair
And
enough.
and so I'm assuming these things would have been present at that point in time. I have no idea, what it looks like today. I've never been there. But the main thing is there has to be a great showdown, right?
Yeah, so in
You
some
agree with
way,
Heiser?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So Heiser presented that.
I agree, and I don't have the mental ability to get all the details as precisely as he puts together. That's my that's my excuse. Mike was a dot connector and
Okay.
did a marvelous job of it.
So then ultimately he has to determine the fates of the fallen angels. And I thought you argued it well in terms of some are kind of doing what God wants them to do, even though they're not angelic like you think of anymore. They're still doing the purposes of God, but some are just absolutely horribly evil.
I think there's differences between them. Yes.
Okay.
Some are good, some are bad, but the Bible never talks about, bad versus good. They just show the Daniel 10 war, or the Daniel 10 struggle that these two beings have, but you don't get into fallen angels as a topic as it was.
Right. And the Jews are pretty afraid of citing much about demons. They cite a little bit. They'll say demons wear masks, in their midrash, but otherwise, I think that's Christian territory, and they don't really want to talk about demons because it sounds so Christian, and they don't want to be viewed as just another flavor of Christianity, But it is intriguing. But but there are fallen angels, and there are demons. And I would argue that there are different levels. And as we mentioned before, in Ephesians 6:13, there are no demons mentioned. There's no Satan mentioned. These particular beings that are being that we're supposed to be wary of are just different dignitaries, so to speak. Okay. So the bottom line is, I wanted to just get your thoughts on this. And you don't have strong thoughts, but you might come back again and comment. You never know. But you're also going there.
Yes, and just to be fair, this is very specific, and I like it. It's interesting. I don't have the mental ability to put all the dots together as carefully as maybe I should, but I appreciate the work that goes into this sort of thing, whether it be Heiser or yourself, because as you say, there has to be a showdown. Now, Jesus had a showdown in Matthew 4 with Satan, and he won. He had a showdown, I think, at the cross. There was some,
absolutely
that there was the defeat of death there, and they were embarrassed. 1 Corinthians 2. In other words, there's various ways to see the showdown. So whether or not and how the world will end, again, I would love to be alive when the end comes, that I can see this. As N.T. Wright says, and I tend to agree that maybe this is laziness, Joel, but he says eschatology in general is a sign pointing into a very dense fog. So I look into the fog and I say, I know Jesus will win, and I don't know how it's going to work. And thankfully, kind of like the weather forecast for next month, I don't have to know what it's going to be. I can trust that God will, win.
I wasn't sure of how to address this until Heiser helped me through this, because he showed me there has to be a great showdown, and it has to be really important. It has to be cross-like. But then also there has to be the death and the hell being cast into the lake of fire. It can't just be, well, you messed up. Here, sprinkle some red heifer on you. No, he has to kill death and hell. He has to destroy them, and he will. But also just before that, there has to be the great showdown. So those are Heiserisms, and he lives on, doesn't he?
He certainly does. Certainly does. Thank you, Joel. This is fun.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you for your input. And please stay on through the disconnect here, and then we'll just talk for a moment. And I have problems with the mouse every time.